I had a moment yesterday that I think everyone listening has probably had at some point in the last few years. I was standing in line for coffee, which is a regular Tuesday, and I was scrolling through Twitter on my left hand. I had a podcast playing in my right ear, probably at 1.5 speed because who has time? The barista was shouting orders, and the TV in the corner was flashing headlines about, I don't even know, the economy, a war, a celebrity trial. It was all just blurring together.
The classic modern sensory overload package.
But it wasn't just overload. It was this distinct sinking feeling of fracturing. Like none of these things had anything to do with each other. The news didn't connect to the economy. The podcast didn't connect to my mood. The people in line were all staring at their own screens and their own little bubbles. It felt like I was looking at the world through a kaleidoscope that someone had smashed on the floor.
Just shards.
Just shards, exactly. And that is a visceral description. And I think you're right. It's the defining feeling of the modern moment. It's not just that things are busy or fast. It's that they don't fit together anymore. There's a lack of coherence.
Exactly. And the story I've always told myself, the story I think most of us tell ourselves to sleep at night, is that this is just the price of doing business in the 21st century.
Right.
We say, well, there are 8 billion people. We have the internet. We're global now.
Sure.
Our brains are just, these tribal monkey brains, and they can't handle the scale.
We got too big, so naturally we broke. That's the story.
It is a very comforting story, isn't it? It sort of absolves us of responsibility in a way. It makes us feel like tragic heroes fighting against the sheer math of the universe. The world is too big and I am too small.
But today, you are here to tell me that the math is wrong.
I am. The stack of research we're diving into today, and we have some heavy hitters here, from archaeology to neuroscience to linguistics, it suggests that the we got too big theory is not just slightly off, it is fundamentally wrong.
That is a big claim because I feel small and the world feels huge and it feels like the hugeness is the problem.
And that feeling is real.
Yeah.
But the sources argue that the fragmentation you feel standing in that coffee shop isn't about the number of people on the planet, and it's not about the smartphone in your hand. It's about a specific type of trauma, a structural civilization-level trauma that destroyed the very mechanism we use to make sense of reality.
So we didn't grow out of our coherence, we broke it.
We didn't just break it. We suffered what the literature calls a systemic rupture. And today, we are going to map out exactly how that happened.
Okay.
We're going to talk about ancient cities that were bigger than medieval London, but operated without a police force. We're going to talk about how the trauma in your brain looks exactly like the trauma in our government. And we're going to talk about the most controversial idea in this entire stack.
Oh, I know which one this is.
That writing literacy itself might not be the glorious invention we think it is.
That's the one I'm still struggling to wrap my head around. The idea that writing is a prosthetic for a damaged mind. I mean, I love my books. I don't like thinking of them as crutches.
It's a radical thought.
Yeah.
But I think by the end of this hour, you might look at your bookshelf a little differently.
No. I'm skeptical, but I'm strapped in. Where do we even start with something this massive?
We have to start by dismantling the excuse. We have to kill the scale fallacy.
The too big myth.
Correct. Because if you believe that big equals broken, you can't see the real problem. The default assumption is that human beings are only capable of deep connection and coherence in small groups. Dunbar's number, 150 people.
Right. The classic village. The baker knows your mom, the priest knows everyone, it's intimate. And the story goes that once you get past that, you need bureaucracy. You need ID cards. You need alienation. That feels like, well, common sense.
That's the assumption. It feels intuitive. But let's look at the source material on the fallacy of scale. Specifically, let's look at a place called Cahokia.
Cahokia. Now, I know this vaguely as the mounds near St. Louis, right?
Yes. But let's place it in time, which is crucial. This is roughly 1050 to 1350 CE, pre-Columbian North America.
Okay, so we're talking about the Middle Ages if we were in Europe.
Precisely. At its peak, Cahokia had a population that estimates put somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 people. Some of the more aggressive estimates go even higher, but let's just stick to the conservative numbers for now.
20,000 people.
20,000 people.
Which, to a modern ear, that sounds like a small town. My suburb has more people than that.
But context is everything. In 1100 CE, 20,000 people is massive. That is bigger than London was at the same time.
Wow, okay.
It's on par with many of the major urban centers in Europe. It wasn't a village where everyone knew everyone's name. It was a metropolis.
Okay, so we have a city, lots of people crammed together, strangers living next to strangers.
And here is where the scale fallacy just breaks down completely. If our modern theory is right, a city that big needs a state. It needs a police force to stop people from killing each other. It needs a distinct class of bureaucrats to manage the grain. It needs a monopoly on violence, as they say.
Right. You need the guys with the spears keeping the peace. You need the magistrate. You need the threat of prison to keep everyone in line.
The archaeology of Cahokia suggests they didn't have that. At least, not in any form we would recognize. There is no evidence of a massive standing army used for internal policing. There's no evidence of a centralized, secular state apparatus that treated people like numbers on a spreadsheet.
So how did they not just dissolve into chaos? If you put 20,000 strangers in a field today and take away the laws and the cops, you get Lord of the Flies in about 45 minutes. It gets ugly fast.
You might. But Cahokia didn't. They operated through what the sources call symbolic integration.
Symbolic integration. Okay, that sounds like academic speak. Unpack that for me. What does that actually mean?
It means the glue holding the city together wasn't force. It was meaning. The layout of the city itself was a cosmological map. When you walked down the street in Cahokia, you weren't just walking through a zoning district. You were walking through a story.
A story. Like the streets were chapters.
Almost literally, yes. The mounds were aligned with celestial events, the solstices, the equinoxes, the daily life of the city, the trade, the construction, the eating was entirely wrapped up in ritual. The civic structure was the religious structure. They weren't two different things.
See, that's so hard for me to picture because today I have my civic duty, paying taxes, obeying traffic laws, standing in line at the DMV. And then I have my spiritual life, which is, I don't know, maybe church or a meditation app or yoga on Tuesdays. They don't touch at all.
Exactly. And that separation is what we call fragmentation. In Cahokia, paying your taxes or, say, contributing your labor to build a new mound, that was a spiritual act. It was how you maintained the balance of the universe.
So you didn't need a policeman to force you to do it.
Why would you? Not doing it would be like deciding to stop breathing. It just wouldn't make sense within your reality. The motivation was internal, woven into the fabric of their world.
So the argument is that you can have 20,000 people, heck, maybe 100,000 people, and they can still function like a tribe if the story is strong enough, if the meaning holds.
Precisely. Scale is a challenge, sure.
Yeah.
You need more food, more waste management. There are logistical problems. But there is no law of physics that says once you hit 10,000 people, you must shatter your worldview into tiny administrative departments. That's a choice, not a law.
I want to push on this, though. Cahokia is one example. Maybe they were just special. Maybe they were unicorns. Or maybe we just don't have the records of their police force because they didn't write them down.
That's fair skepticism. So let's go back further, way further. Let's look at the old copper complex.
This is the Lake Superior stuff, right? The Great Lakes?
Yes. We are talking about the Great Lakes region. And we are going deep into time, 7,000 to maybe 10,000 years ago.
Which, in my mental timeline, is caveman territory. Or at least very simple hunter-gatherers, people poking things with sharp sticks.
That's the stereotype. Small bands, barely surviving, maybe trading a shiny rock occasionally. But the archaeological evidence shows something completely different. We find copper, pure copper from Lake Superior, showing up all over the continent, thousands of miles away.
So they were trading.
They weren't just trading, they were mining on an industrial scale. We're talking about tons and tons of copper extraction. This requires logistics. It requires supply lines. It requires coordination between groups of people who might live 1,000 miles apart and speak different dialects.
And again, no email, no Zoom, no written contracts, no United States of copper.
No state. The coordination was achieved through what the research calls holistic symbolic narrative reasoning.
Okay, that's a mouthful. Holistic symbolic narrative reasoning. Let's break that down because I have a feeling that phrase is going to be important later.
It's the core of this whole deep dive. Holistic means it's all connected. Economics isn't separate from religion, which isn't separate from kinship.
Okay.
Symbolic means physical objects carry deep piss, meaning the copper isn't just a metal for making tools, it's a piece of the earth's power. It has a spirit.
Got it.
And narratives means the rules are taught and enforced through stories, not lists of regulations.
So when I trade you copper for, I don't know, seashells?
It's not just a transaction. It's a ritual. We are reenacting a myth. The trade creates a bond between us that is sanctioned by the spirits or the ancestors or the cosmos itself. The trust isn't enforced by a written contract, it's enforced by our shared cosmology.
So if I cheat you, I'm not just a bad businessman.
You're breaking the universe. You're creating a tear in the fabric of reality. The social consequences would be immense, far worse than a lawsuit.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. The scale fallacy is the idea that we got too big for these kinds of stories to work. But you're saying these stories worked for massive networks of people for thousands of years.
Exactly. So if we look around today and see fragmentation, we can't blame the population count. We can't just throw up our hands and say, oh, well, there are just too many of us.
Which is actually kind of a relief. Because if the problem was too many people, the only solution is pretty dark.
Right. If scale is the problem, the only solution is Thanos.
Exactly. Snap your fingers, wipe out half the population to restore balance. It's a deeply pessimistic view.
But if the problem isn't scale, then the problem is structural. It's about the software, not the number of users. And that means it can be fixed. But before we can even think about fixing it, we have to understand what broke it.
Yeah, okay. So we've acquitted the population explosion. It's innocent, so who is the culprit? Because something definitely broke. I feel it every time I open the news. I feel it in my bones.
This brings us to the mechanism. The sources call it the ontological rupture.
Ontological rupture. It sounds like a weapon from a sci-fi movie.
Captain, the hull has suffered an ontological rupture. It feels like one when it hits a culture. Let's just define ontology. It's a fancy word for your basic theory of reality. What is real? What is a human? What is a god? What is value? Your ontology is the map you use to navigate existence.
So my ontology is basically my operating system. It's the base card.
Exactly. And a rupture is when something happens, usually a severe trauma, that makes that map completely useless.
Give me a concrete example. How does this start? Does someone just wake up one day and decide to break the map?
No, it's never a conscious choice. It starts with a destabilizing event. It could be a massive war, a civil schism, a plague, or what the sources call an ontological conflict, when two cultures with incompatible maps of reality collide.
Paint the picture for me.
Imagine a civilization that believes, deeply and truly, that their king is divine. He is the son of the sun god. The king ensures the harvest. The king keeps the cosmos in balance. The entire society is built on this one non-negotiable truth. It's not just a political opinion, it's gravity.
Okay, I'm with you.
Then, a neighboring army who does not share this belief comes in. They conquer the city, capture the king, and execute him in the public square for everyone to see. And the next day, the sun still rises, the harvest doesn't fail.
The map just broke.
The map didn't just break, the map lied. The fundamental truth that held the entire society together, the king is the sun, has been empirically disproven by an incredibly traumatic event. This is the catalyst for rupture.
So what happens to the people? Do they just shrug and say, well, I guess we were wrong about that whole divine king thing?
No, that's too simple, too psychologically clean. They enter a state called aporia.
Aporia? That's Greek.
Yes, it literally means impassable path. It's a state of profound puzzlement where you cannot move forward because your entire system of logic is jammed. The old answers don't work, and there are no new answers yet.
I like the analogy you used in Krishonos about the computer operating system.
I think it's the best way to visualize it. Imagine your culture is running an operating system. Let's call it Culture OS v1.0. It handles everything. How you treat your spouse, how you trade grain, how you bury the dead, everything.
And it works. It runs all the apps of daily life.
It works fine.
Mm-hmm.
But then a new file type comes in, a massive trauma, a brutal contradiction, a piece of reality that the OS was not built to handle. Dead king but sun still rising.exe.
File corrupted. Cannot be opened.
Exactly. The system tries to process it, but it can't. The logic loops. And what happens when a computer encounters a fatal error? It can't resolve.
It crashes, or it reboots in safe mode.
Safe mode. That is the key insight. Think about what your computer looks like in safe mode.
It's ugly. The resolution is terrible. The icons are huge. You can't run any complex programs. You can't watch videos. You can just do the basics, move files around, delete things. That's about it.
It strips away all non-essential functionality to ensure survival. It reduces complexity because complexity is dangerous when this system is unstable.
And a civilization does the same thing.
That is what the sources call the systemic contraction. When the shared meaning breaks, when aporia sets in, the society contracts. It simplifies. It stops trying to hold complex, nuanced relational truths together because nuance is too computationally expensive for a traumatized system.
So instead of the king is divine and also a man and also the embodiment of the state, which is a really complex, multi-layered idea.
It becomes binary. Good versus bad, us versus them, believer versus heretic, safe versus dangerous.
We go low resolution.
We go extremely low resolution. And this is where the deep dive took a turn that really shook me.
Yeah.
Because we're not just using trauma as a metaphor here.
Right. I saw the notes on Bessel van der Kolk. The body keeps the score. This is hardcore neuroscience territory.
It is. The sources argue that this process rupture, aporia, contraction is isomorphic.
Meaning it's the same shape, the same pattern?
It's the exact same pattern. What happens to a single human brain during post-traumatic stress is exactly what happens to a civilization during a systemic rupture. The micro and the macro are mirrors of each other.
Okay, so walk me through the brain side of it. If I get traumatized, let's say I'm in a serious car crash, what happens to my personal operating system?
Integration fails. Normally, your brain is a symphony. Your memory of the past, your feeling of the present, your plan for the future, they're all playing together, conducted by your prefrontal cortex.
And the crash.
The crash creates a deafening, shattering noise. The amygdala, the brain smoke detector, gets stuck in the on position. It just screams danger over and over again.
And the frontal lobe, the conductor, the thinking part.
It goes offline. Or at least it gets overruled by the alarm system.
Yeah.
The brain loses its ability to integrate the experience. You have a flashback of the sound over here, a physical pain in your shoulder there, a sudden burst of rage here, but they don't form a coherent story. You lose the narrative.
You lose the narrative.
What does a person with severe PTSD look like to the outside world?
They're jumpy, hypervigilant, they see threats everywhere.
They're rigid. They need control. They need to know exactly where the exits are. They start to categorize everyone, friend or enemy. There is no middle ground. Middle ground is where the danger hides.
They lose the ability to play, to be spontaneous.
Exactly. Play requires a baseline of safety. Nuance requires safety. When you are traumatized, you kill the nuance to survive. You contract into a much smaller, more predictable, but more brittle world.
Okay, so that's the individual. Now zoom out. Look at our society. Look at our political discourse. Look at our online culture.
What do you see?
I see hypervigilance. I see rigidity. I see if you aren't with me 100%, you are my mortal enemy. I see a complete inability to handle nuance or contradiction.
We are living in a macro version of a traumatized nervous system.
That is a profoundly haunting thought.
That is the thesis. Our civilization suffered a rupture, or maybe a series of ruptures. The Industrial Revolution, the World Wars, the death of God, maybe all of them stacked up. And now we are stuck in safe mode. We are desperately trying to manage the chaos by putting everything into little disconnected boxes.
And this explains the feeling in the coffee shop.
Yes.
The fracturing, the sense that nothing fits together. It's because the integrator, the part of the cultural brain that's supposed to weave the story together, is offline.
It's offline. And so we have built a world of fragments.
Right.
We have the Department of the Economy, the Department of Health, the Department of Defense, and they barely talk to each other.
Just like in the traumatized brain, the memory doesn't talk to the emotion.
Yeah.
The sensation doesn't talk to the rational mind.
Exactly. But, and here's the twist, we didn't just sit there and suffer in this broken state. We're an inventive species. We tried to fix it. We built a tool to help us navigate this broken, low-resolution world.
And this is where we get to the prosthetic.
Yes.
Because usually when we talk about the great tools of civilization, we talk about them as pure progress. We invented the wheel, we invented the steam engine, we invented writing.
The crown jewel of humanity.
Yes.
Literacy. The thing that separates us from the animals.
Right. Thank God we learned to write, or we'd still be grunting in caves. But this source, the compensatory scaffold, it flips that completely upside down. It turns it on its head.
It argues that the explosion of text, the move toward a society that relies entirely on written laws, written contracts, written data, wasn't a sign of health. It was a symptom of a profound disability.
Explain that, because I love my books.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear that my library is evidence of brain damage.
I love books too. But think of it this way. If you have two perfectly healthy legs, do you need a crutch?
No, a crutch would just get in the way, slow me down.
You only invent a crutch when your leg is broken. The source argues that holistic symbolic narrative reasoning, that ability to hold the whole complex integrated story in your head the way the people of Cahokia did, that was the healthy leg.
And when the rupture hit?
We broke the leg. We lost the internal capacity to maintain that level of coherence. Our collective memory failed. Our cultural integration failed. So we had to externalize the data. We had to offload it.
We had to write it down because we couldn't carry it anymore.
Exactly. We said, I can't feel the connection to the cosmos anymore, so I better write a theology textbook to try and explain it to myself. Or I can't intuitively feel how to treat my neighbor with justice, so I better write a detailed law code to force me to do it.
So the text is a scaffold. It's holding up a building that can no longer stand on its own 2 feet.
And notice the quality of the language when this happens. When you
Yeah.
move from an oral tradition to a written law, how does the language change?
It gets stiffer. It
Yeah.
gets precise in a very rigid way. It gets full of thou shalts and hereinaways and clauses and subclauses.
It becomes literal. It
Everything.
becomes categorical. It stops being poetic and starts being regulatory. In an oral culture, a myth breathes. It adapts to the moment, to the audience. In a text culture, the words are frozen on the page. You get the letter of the law.
So we trade flexibility for permanence. We trade aliveness for stability.
We trade narrative compression for abstraction. In the oral world, a single story is compressed data. A myth about a river might tell you where the best fish are, why the currents are dangerous, how to navigate it in a canoe, and why you should respect its spirit.
It's dense. It's layered.
It's incredibly high bandwidth. But when we write it down in the modern fragmented style, we abstract it. We draw a hydrographic map of the river. We write a government regulation about fishing limits. We write a geology report about the sediment content.
We split the living river into 3 different dead documents.
Exactly. We fragmented the river to understand it. And this creates a feedback loop, doesn't it? A dangerous one.
A feedback loop. How so?
Because language isn't just a passive tool for describing the world. Language actively shapes how you see the world. It shapes your cognition.
The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, basically.
In a broad sense, yes. If you invent a rigid, binary, literal language to cope with a trauma, and then you teach that new, contracted language to children.
They grow up thinking the world is rigid, binary, and literal. They mistake the crutch for a real leg.
Precisely. We built the prosthetic to help us limp, but now the prosthetic is reshaping our very bones. We're training our brains to be fragmented, because our primary tool for thinking our language is itself fragmented.
So it's a cycle. Distorted ontology leads to linguistic adaptation, which in turn leads to cognitive reinforcement.
And round we go. We think we're getting smarter because we have Wikipedia, we have more raw data than any human in history. But the source suggests we're actually suffering from a massive atrophy of our meaning-making capacity. We've outsourced our coherence to the server.
That is a heavy thought to sit with. It implies that my reliance on Google Maps is actually making me forget how to navigate the world.
In a literal and a metaphorical sense, yes.
But I want to go back to what we lost. We keep using this phrase existential coherence, and we've defined it as this union of psychology, ethics, cosmology, and ritual. But those are still just big abstract words. I want to know what that felt like for a person living inside it.
Okay, let's do a thought experiment. It's the best way to feel the difference.
I'm ready.
In the modern world, if you are having a mental breakdown, if you feel anxious and lost, where do you go?
I go to a therapist, a
Yeah.
psychologist, a shrink.
Right, a specialist in the mechanics of the individual brain. Now, let's say you are having a moral crisis. You don't know right from wrong anymore. Where do you go?
I don't know, a priest, maybe? An ethics professor?
Yeah.
Maybe I just poll my friends on Instagram. It's not clear.
Exactly. Okay, and if you want to know how the universe was made and what your place in it is,
I ask an astrophysicist. I watch a documentary with Neil deGrasse Tyson.
and if you just want to feel a sense of belonging, of community,
I go to a football game. Or a concert. Or a political rally.
do you see 4 different fundamental human needs? 4 different buildings, 4 different experts, and none of them talk to each other. The therapist doesn't care about the Big Bang. The astrophysicist doesn't care about your moral crisis. The football coach doesn't care about your mental health.
It's all chopped up into little pieces.
It's chopped up. Now imagine a world where those 4 things are the same thing, addressed in the same place at the same time.
How does that even work?
Let's look at ritual. The sources we're drawing on here, people like Emil Durkheim, Clifford Geertz, they explain that in an integrated society, ritual isn't just a pointless ceremony. It's the social glue. It's the framework where meaning happens.
Right.
And another anthropologist, Victor Turner, talks about liminality, that crucial in-between state when you're transitioning from one part of life to another. In a coherent culture, when you go through a major ritual, you are handling all 4 of those needs at once.
Give me an example.
Take a coming-of-age ritual, a real one. It is a psychological transformation. You are guided through a process to stop being a child. It is an ethical transformation. You are formally taught the duties and responsibilities of an adult. It is a cosmological event. It's often tied to the stars or the seasons, placing your personal journey into the great story of the universe. And it is a deeply communal event. Your entire society is there, witnessing and affirming your change.
So you aren't just turning 18 and getting the right to buy a lottery ticket.
No, you are being rewoven into the fabric of reality. You are being told explicitly and viscerally your mind, your morals, your community, and the stars were all part of the same single story, and this is your new place in it.
And because we lost that.
Because we lost that, we have what sources call failed initiations. We have a society full of adults who are psychologically still adolescents because the culture never successfully moved them across the threshold. We have people looking for cosmology in politics or looking for a sense of community in consumer brands.
We're confused. We're looking for the right things in all the wrong places.
Exactly. We are trying to buy bread at the hardware store, and then we get angry and confused when we're still hungry.
I was reading the notes on Alfred North Whitehead and Michael Polanyi, and they seem to blame modern science for some of this, or at least a specific kind of science.
Whitehead is crucial here. He had this devastating critique of what he called mechanistic materialism.
That's the idea that everything is just atoms bumping into other atoms. You are just a bag of chemicals.
Right. Modern science, which is incredibly powerful, let's be clear, it gave us antibiotics and computers, achieved its power through a method of radical abstraction. It said, to understand water, let's ignore how the water makes you feel. Let's ignore the beauty of the water. Let's ignore the water's role in our creation myth. And let's just look at the H2O molecule.
It isolated the variable.
It isolated the variable. And that's great for plumbing. It's great for chemistry. But if you apply that method to everything, if you do that to the human mind, to society, to nature, you lose what Polanyi called tacit knowledge.
Tacit knowledge. That's embodied knowing, right?
Yes. The things you know but cannot say. The knowledge that lives in your hands, in your gut, in your relationships.
Like how to ride a bike. You can't really write a physics-based manual on how to balance. You just have to feel it in your body.
Exactly. That is tacit knowledge. And the neuroscientist Antonio Damasio backs us up from a completely different angle. He argues that the self isn't a little man in your head. It's not a brain in a jar. It is an embodied process. You cannot heal the mind without understanding the body, and you cannot understand the body without the environment it's in.
But all of our modern institutions act like we are brains in jars.
Which is precisely why we feel fragmented. We are trying to live in a model of reality that says we are separate, logical, abstract machines, when in our deepest biological reality, we are embodied, relational, meaning-seeking ecosystems. The map doesn't match the territory.
So this leads me to the big question, the depressing question maybe. Is this just evolution?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, we like to think we're advancing. We have iPhones, we have heart transplants. Maybe this fragmentation is the necessary price of being smart. Maybe that holistic thinking is just primitive. You know, oh, look at the cute ancient people with their myths and rituals. We have data now. We grew up.
Ah, yes. The evolutionary superiority argument. We are the adults in the room. They were the children.
Yeah. Is there any truth to that? Are we just smarter and this is what smart feels like?
So the myth of cognitive fragmentation rejects this entirely. It argues that holistic reasoning is not primitive. It is just different. It's a different mode of cognition.
Different how?
Think of it as two different operating modes for the human brain. One is the analytic mode. That's the modern mode. It isolates variables. It's precise. It's very good for control. It's good for mechanics. It gets you to the moon.
Okay.
The other is the holistic mode. That's the pre-rupture mode. It integrates variables. It prioritizes connection and relationship over isolation. It's good for meaning. It's good for resilience. It's what keeps you sane.
So in a sense, we traded sanity for control.
You could frame it that way, yes. But the key point is that the holistic mode isn't stupid or simple. It's actually incredibly sophisticated. To hold a single narrative that successfully balances ethics, psychology, cosmology, and social dynamics all at once requires a massive amount of cognitive processing power. It's just a different kind of processing.
It's parallel processing versus serial processing, maybe?
That's a good analogy. And here is the truly hopeful part of this whole deep dive. There is no biological rule that says we can't go back, or rather, that we can't re-engage that mode.
Wait, really? Because I feel like my brain has been permanently rewired by the internet. I feel like I can't read a book for more than 10 minutes without an itch to check my phone.
Your habits have been rewired.
Yeah.
Your culture has been rewired. Your institutions have been rewired. But your biology, your fundamental neural hardware, you have the same brain as the person who built Cahokia. You have the same brain as the person who memorized the entire Odyssey.
So the hardware is fine. It's the software that's corrupted.
The hardware is fine. The shift to fragmentation is cultural and institutional, not biological. We haven't evolved past meaning. We have just stopped training for it. We've built a world that discourages it.
That is surprisingly hopeful. It means we aren't broken mutants. We're just out of practice.
We are unconditioned. We have let a crucial cognitive muscle atrophy because we've been leaning so heavily on the prosthetic.
Okay, we've covered a massive amount of ground here. We've gone from Cahokia to neuroscience to linguistics. Let's try to synthesize this. Let's put the pieces back together, which I guess is the whole point of this deep dive.
Let's run through the chain reaction one last time, because once you see the sequence, you start seeing it everywhere.
Okay, walk me through it. Step 1.
Step 1, systemic rupture. Not scale, not technology. A destabilizing event. A war. A deep conflict. A trauma that shatters the shared story.
Step 2.
Aporia. The confusion. The breakdown of meaning. The OS crash. The moment the map no longer matches the territory and you're lost in the woods.
Step 3.
Contraction. The system, just like a traumatized nervous system, shrinks to survive. It simplifies. It creates rigid binaries. Us versus them. Good versus bad. It enters safe mode.
Step 4.
Linguistic adaptation. We invent a prosthetic, language, literal, legalistic abstract to handle the broken world. We start writing rule books because we forgot the stories.
And the final step, the one that locks it in.
Cognitive reinforcement. We use that broken, contracted language to teach our children, which locks the broken world model in place for the next generation.
And here we are, living inside the contraction.
Mistaking it for complexity. We think we live in a complex world because we have a million laws and a billion gigabytes of data. But in terms of meaning, in terms of existential coherence, we're actually living in a very simple, very brittle, very contracted state.
So what's the so what here? Why does this matter to the person listening to this on their commute right now, feeling that same fragmentation I felt in the coffee shop?
It matters because we keep trying to fix the problem with the wrong tools. We feel the fragmentation. We feel the anxiety. So what do? We demand more data, we write more laws, we create more subcommittees, we download more apps to track our sleep and our moods and our steps.
You try to use the prosthetic to fix the broken leg.
Exactly. We try to fix the problems of fragmentation with more fragmentation. We think if we just define the terms more precisely, if we just get more granular data, if we make one more rule, we'll finally find the answer. But that just feeds the feedback loop.
It accelerates the contraction.
It makes the walls of the box even thicker. The real solution isn't more data. It isn't more laws. It's repairing the symbolic architecture. It's a different kind of work entirely.
You know, realizing that scale isn't the enemy is actually a huge relief.
It is, isn't it?
Because if the problem was there are too many people, the only solution is terrible. But if the problem is we broke the story, then the solution is fix the story. Which is hard, but not impossible.
We don't have to shrink the population to find meaning. We have to recover the capacity for holistic, symbolic narrative reasoning.
Yeah.
We have to relearn how to integrate.
We have to start seeing the connections again between our mental health and our community rituals, between our ethics and our cosmology, between the river and the fishing regulation.
And we have to stop treating language as just a tool for regulation and start treating it as a vessel for meaning again.
This leaves me with a thought that I really want to leave the listener with. We talked about language as a prosthetic, and we talked about the atrophy of our meaning-making muscles.
Yes.
If language shapes cognition, and if we are currently speaking and thinking in a language that was designed for a fragmented, traumatized world, what would happen if we consciously started speaking differently?
That is the provocative question right there.
What if we started trying to practice narrative compression again? What if, instead of always trying to be more precise and more literal, we tried to be more poetic, more mythical, even in our daily lives?
It's a radical thought. If literacy, or at least our data hoarding encyclopedic version of it, is the prosthetic, is it possible that our absolute reliance on the cloud to remember everything for us is actually what's preventing us from understanding anything?
Are we trading understanding for storage?
I think we are. We've outsourced the active integration to the server, and all we've left for ourselves are the disconnected fragments.
So, to you, the learner listening, next time you feel that sense of overwhelm, that feeling that the world is broken into a million pieces, don't blame the size of the crowd. Don't even blame the internet.
Look for the cracks in the meaning, and ask yourself, what story stopped working here? And how do we together start weaving a new one?
Thanks for diving deep with us.
My pleasure.